here, and welcome to Into All Truth. I know it's going to sound really windy, but I'm going to cover Sukkot and some of the hikes that we did with my fellow Arks. And as you guys know, I'm a descendant of the Ashanti tribe. The Ashanti were from Judea and had priests who carried on the Erve or Hebrew. Ashan was one of the sons of Judah, and their city was a city of Levitical priests. And they wore the breastplate of the tribes you can see in these pictures. I'm also a descendant of Paul Bogle, and he was part of a year-long rebellion against a sort of a Jim Crow state in Jamaica. So he led a rebellion and was martyred. I'm also a descendant of Nanny of the Maroons, who signed a treaty in the 1700s with the British and kept all of the Maroons free, and to this day and living in the mountains in Jamaica. The interesting thing about Paul Bogle was that he practiced a strange form of Christianity that emphasized baptism. So he was actually a kind of Levitical priest. So that is my heritage. But anyway, today I want to go again into our Sukkot and some of the things that happened for the women at Sukkot. And finally, we'll see the baptism, which is pretty beautiful and exciting. And I'll go into a lot of the lessons that I learned there. So this is kind of documentary as well as a study at the same time. But first of all, we need to start with what Sukkot is all about. So let's get into it. So Sukkot is the Feast of Tabernacles, and it is around the time that Yeshua was born, and he is our kinsman redeemer who we celebrate. It's during the fall harvest, which is a time of reaping, and we await his redemption of us from captivity, from slavery, and his returning us to our home, to the promised land. It's also when judgment is poured out. It's also a time of rehearsing and returning to the wilderness for a second cleansing of the rebels. It's also a time of purging. It's a time of approaching Mount Sinai, purification in the waters. You blow the shofar to regather everyone. The shofar is also blown for judgment, and it's also blown to go up to the mount in the wilderness. And it's a time to hear from Yah. It's a moed. It's an appointed time when you meet with Yah'S. This is the baptism of deliverance from death and the old man in Yeshua HaMashiach, and of course the protecting of Moshe in the basket and the protection of the children of Israel in the ark with Noah. So this is the baptism of water that will bring us out. And for me, I got baptized because I felt I had dirty baptisms. And in reading scripture and learning about Hebraic culture, it turns out that you must be baptized in the still waters of a lake to be saved. That is the tendency. And so it's not like in a pool, it's not like in a bathtub, as they do in churches. It has to be water that has life in it. And the water that we were in had gold in it. Like I said, it had volcanic ash in it, and it had many fish in it. So this is why many of us got baptized. But also, I believe it was symbolic of and in anticipation of our redemption back to the promised land.
Daniel Ban Israel!
Now all that which those who took us captive, all that they worshipped will now turn on them, just like the serpent turned on Egypt when we picked it up as a staff. Okay? And we will now take up the staff of the shepherds over the tribes and nations as the tribulation comes. So that is for the deliverance of all nations. Okay? Now, fall Sukkot is when you plant a seed to give birth in the spring. And the libation has given birth to the whirlwind, for the retribution of the blood of the dead slaves buried in the ocean, and the children buried in the rivers and lakes and streams of the alligator. So, in summary, the snake and the dragon are the god of Babylon, whom we have now taken authority over. Now, all that which those who took us captive, all that they worshipped will now turn on them, just like the serpent turned on Egypt when we picked it up as a staff. Okay? And we will now take up the staff of the shepherds over the tribes and nations as the tribulation comes. So that is for the deliverance of all nations. Okay? Israel, Yahuwah Elohim, Yahuwah, hey, Shema Israel, Yahuwah Elohim, Yahuwah, hey, Shema Israel, Yahuwah Elohim, Yahuwah, hey, Shema Israel, 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 Israel. Praise Yah! Hallelujah! Blessings and honor and power, blessings and honor and power, victory has a name, it's Yahusha. Has a name, it's Yahusha. Redemption has a name, it's Yahusha. Holiness has a name, it's Yahusha. Victory has a name, it's Yahusha. The Word has a name, it's Yahusha. Redemption has a name, it's Yahusha. Amen. Amen. Blessings and honor and power. Amen. Amen. Blessings and honor and power. Guys, you won't believe it, but after this we had a wedding, and the first two people actually to be baptized in the water were this young bride and groom. So after the baptism, we had this beautiful wedding. Unbelievable, right? Talk about a moe. So the union of the bride with the groom. How symbolic was that? And I learned how to make a tzitzit. So I made a tzitzit for the groom, and then Dinah's the one who you see singing in the earlier scene, leading all the women. She made the one for the bride. So I made a royal blue one with all of these different numbers representing things that happened to the tribes and the numbers of the tribes.
Rashad and Erica have put together a ketubah, which is an agreement between the two of them, and it's being done within the house of Yehuda, and it's being done in front of all these witnesses.
I want to review some of what we as women did on our walk. Why? Because what we did reflects the practices that women of the Gad tribe in Ghana do, and it's a reflection of the story of Exodus to the point of reflecting the Exodus of everyone, all Israelites in captivity over the entire world. So I just want to say to you that Huldah, the wife of Mori Yosh, and she's a minister herself. She's written a number of books. She teaches Hebrew. She really shepherded the women before and behind throughout our hike. And she would, if anyone got lost or distracted, she would go and get them. She would just kind of appear out of nowhere and find people who were off the path. And she alone heard both of the warning growls of the lion in the wilderness. So she really did perform a shepherding role on our hike. So that was really beautiful. Now, I want to say that there was also someone with us who was a descendant of Harriet Tubman, who was, known as a woman called Moses. And she actually led the beginning of our first walk initially. So there were a lot of signs and symbols just speaking volumes over the 400 years of history to us and to this present time that we're in, this appointed Sukkot, this appointed time where Yah really showed up for us. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the signs that we were shown in our wilderness about the deliverance of Yisrael from this last slavery. Now, in Exodus, Yah says that there will be 3 signs that he will give to Moses that will let the Israelites, not the Egyptians or the Babylonians, so not the Babylonians here today, nor the Egyptians back in the Egyptian captivity, but these will be 3 signs to let the Israelites know and understand their captivity was ending. And I have been doing some studies with Rabbi Akwite of the Gad tribe in Ghana, and so this really clarified a lot of things for me, which I'm going to go over with you, and I hope I communicate it as well as he did in some of my own revelations. So when we look at the first signs, we start with Exodus 4:1. And it says, "And Moses answered Yah and said, Behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken to my voice, for they will say, Yireh has not appeared unto thee. Yireh said unto him, What is in thine hand? And he said, A rod. And he said, Cast it to the ground. And so Moshe cast it to the ground and became a serpent. And Moshe fled before it. And Yireh said to Moses, Put forth thine hand and take it by the tail. And Moshe put forth his hand and caught it, and it became like a rod in his hand, that they may believe that Yireh, the Elohim of their fathers, Yah of Abraham, Yah of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob have appeared unto thee." So this was done that the Israelites might believe that Yireh, the God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to the shepherds of our group for the deliverance of Yisrael. So I want you to kind of put a pin in that and remember that the hand is mentioned. Put forth thy hand. Okay? So Yireh, or Yah, asks Moshe, what is in your hand? Okay? And Moshe says, a rod. Okay? He says, a rod. But it eventually becomes a snake, a serpent. Now, the rod means tribe or staff. And in the past, Israel, under the captivity of the Egyptians, had become part of the tribe of serpents and were under the false god of the serpents. Okay, just like we're under the false gods of the Babylonians today, which is truly the serpent, the snake, the dragon. So Moses casting down his rod to become a snake, then picking it back up to become a rod, was highly symbolic because he ran away at first, fearing the snake, and then Yah said, go back and pick it up. And so again, it was the fear of the god of Egypt, of the tribe of Egypt. And the Hebrews had been treated as though they were vermin. So vermin is viper, as though they were the lowest. And they were said to have spread like vermin, spread like a plague in Egypt. And that's why the Egyptians feared them. But now Yah shows Moshe and the people of Israel that they are a tribe. This is for the healing and redemption of the nations, to know who they are so they can be healed of this spiritual, physical slavery. So first, let's talk about the snake. So initially, he asks, what is in his hand? Okay? So Moshe then is able to pick up the staff and know that it is his tribe, and he no longer needs to fear that he's a snake, because in truth, Israel has always led itself into captivity. And if you're dealing with a strong oppressor and you've enslaved yourself, at a certain point you think that you can never be redeemed, because the oppressor, if they aren't convicted of their sin and they don't free you from your slavery righteously, they begin to oppress you even more, and they can dehumanize you and make you feel that you deserve everything you're getting and you will never be free of this slavery. It is the eternal consequence of sin. Whereas Yah gives us redemption. So again, I want to say that it was so interesting that what we did there at our Sukkot was what the women in Africa do to remember Exodus and Passover. So the women of Africa, the Ga women, the women in Ghana, remember the Exodus with the walking sticks of the tribe. Now, when we climbed up the mountain to get towards the water, I went with a couple of women, Cherie and Yah'S, or El. And Cherie was a descendant of the Maroons like me, who live up in the mountains in Jamaica. And she helped us to the mountain. And like Nanny, who led many Jamaicans to freedom. Now, when we went down the mountain towards the water, Ya'el helped us. And of course, Ya'el is one of the warriors in the Bible. But when we got to a place where there was dry wood near the river, she was afraid to go any further down the mountain. She was afraid to get into the wood because she said there might be snakes in the wood. And she's familiar with California. She has no fear of nature in California. I'm from Canada. So she ran up to me and she was afraid of snakes being in the wood. But for me, I wasn't used to that. So I just went down. I said, come on. And so then I just crossed over the snakes. I stepped on them and I was not afraid. And I think it's because we no longer have to fear the serpent, because Yah is with us. So just like Shaul, when he picked and Moshe, they both picked up the snake in the wilderness. Okay, and they defeated it. So when Kimberly, one of the other women on the walk, came down and approached us, she started picking up the dry wood, and she picked up the staff that looked like the lamed, that looked like the stuffer's shaft, that looked sort of like a snake. And so here now she was seizing this snake. And then after her, everyone started picking up these walking sticks. More than 12 women picked up these walking sticks, just unconsciously. We offered them to everybody. And the interesting thing about the walking sticks was that they were white bleached. They looked like dry bones. So how many like the dry white hand of death. Okay? Because remember, Moshe is asked to put his hand in his cloak to turn it white. All right? And so now that we held on to these staffs, they became symbols of the living staffs of Israel. And so this comes to the second sign, the leprous hand. Yahweh said furthermore unto Moshe, now put thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. And he said, put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom. And behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. So now here is the second sign. The hand of Yah is shown first, the brown hand, the hand of the earth. Then it becomes the white hand, the hand of death, the hand of Ha-Satan. When we look at these representations of Ha-Satan as aliens, he's always white. Okay, this is the hand of death. He's dead to Yah. He is dead and cut off. And so this is the white leprous hand of death. This is the white hand of our European oppressors. And remember, when Jonah went into the belly of the fish, he came out white, almost leprous. He went down into death and came back into life, but he came out leprous, white at first. And same with Miriam. Miriam was turned white and leprous when she denied the lineage of Zipporah, wife of Moshe, daughter of Jethro, the Midianite priest, who had initiated Moshe into the priesthood. Okay? So those are some incidents of leprosy causing, being a symbol of death and being cut off. Okay? But now when Moshe brings his hand out the third time, he reveals his hand the third time, it's brown again. And so this symbol symbolizes the hand of Yah, the white hand of death now becoming the hand of life from Yah. So no longer being enslaved to the children of Japheth and the descendants of the Ammonites, but now being helped by the hand of Yah. So I just want to digress here a little bit. America, the word America is supposed to derive from the term Ammonites. And these are the descendants of Canaan, the fallen. Because in the 400-year prophecy, it says that the fourth generation descendants will return here, will return once the iniquity of the Amorites is complete. So when Israel went into Egypt, they had to wait for the iniquity of the Amorites to become complete, the descendants of Canaan. And so this is sort of a parallel because Americans are actually supposed to be Ammonites. And there's also another parallel here. It says that the deliverance of Israel will come when the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So the deliverance of Israel is supposed to happen when the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Okay? And that is, it's in Luke 21:24, it says, Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. In the same way that in the fourth generation, your descendants will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So the Amorites, according to this article, are descendants of Canaan, and records from ancient times about the Amorites show that they are descendants of Lot and Canaan, and they were known to be fair-skinned, possess blue eyes, aquiline and straight noses, thin lips, and fair hair. So here again is another parallel to the Europeans, to those of Japheth, with the straight hair, the white skin, all of those things. So when we talk about the hand turning white and leprous, the hand that brought death, the hand that was of the cursing, now it's turned back to brown. We now will know by the delivering hand of Yah that the cursing is over. And that brings me to the third sign. The third sign is the pouring out of water to blood on the land. And again, now it's interesting because during our walk, I was the one to bring the women down to the water. Okay, that was my whole objective through the whole thing. Now, my ancestor Paul Bogle practiced a lot of baptism in his ministry, coming from these ancient practices of baptism among the Ashanti in Judea, in Africa. Okay? And so when our elder finally sat down by the river and washed her feet, and all of us washed our feet, okay, it was like a preparation for priesthood. But the other thing she did was to pour out the water, doing libations, pouring out the water for the ancestors, she kept saying, for the ancestors.
Where there's no name,
For the ancestors. Yes. For all the ancestors.
to the book of
For all those who brought us part of the way.
Yes.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
and you will see that there's a land.
This is for the slaves who died in the ocean, drowned in the ocean, were chased. The ships were apparently chased by groups of sharks because so many bodies were thrown overboard, or people would kill themselves and babies were thrown overboard. And also, this was about the pouring out of the waters onto the land to show the blood crying out from the land. Okay, the blood crying out from the land in the same way that Abel's blood cried out to Yah from the land, just to show Yah has heard us. Yah has heard of the suffering of his people in captivity, just like he heard Abel's blood crying out from the land. So this water is poured out as a libation, and it's poured out on the land to symbolize the ancestors who were lost at sea or drowned, and the babies that were dragged into the water by alligators, because they would chum the water and the alligator, the dragon, would come. So I'm going to suspect that we are going to see some sort of a dragon, whether it's the behemoth or the Leviathan in our times, come up out of the water.
You know what that song means in Ebonics, right? What they saying?
Come by here, y'all.
Come by here, y'all. Come by here.
Help us because these people are killing us.
Come by
They
here.
are subjecting us to craziness. And we want to give up our lives, but we want to live.
Master.
So once again, the water becomes the blood crying out to Yah, no longer hid in the waters. And this is symbolizing to us, to Israel, not to Babylon or the Egyptians, but to us, that the time of Jacob's trouble is over and the judgment is now falling on the Egyptians. And it's interesting because I did talk in one of my last videos about dreams and visions, and a dream and a vision where I talked about a sequence of 3 moons, 3 sets of moons, from new moon to full moon to new moon to full moon to new moon to full moon, covering August, September, October, that something was going to happen. And I thought, well, maybe it was the Sukkot. But at the beginning, on the very day of the new moon in October, is the day that Hurricane Michael has been set upon America. And Michael is the archangel, the great prince who stands for the children of thy people, according to Daniel. It says, and at that time, Michael stand up, the great prince which stands for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as was never since there was a nation to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. So Michael is the one who moves out of the way of the door of heaven at the end times, and he will stand up for the children of Israel. And this hurricane is named after him. Okay, in Revelation it also says that Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. Okay, so here is the delivering hand of Yah in the form of the hurricane, in the form of the tornado, in the form of Michael coming in the tornado. So the night before I left the camp, it was virtually empty. There was just a few of us who were among the last volunteers to do High Shabbat on the Monday. And that night I heard the lion prowling around my tent. It went about 180 degrees around it. I heard the branch snap, all of that kind of thing. And I was like, cats, aren't you quieter than that? But it's a dry environment. So it was about 2:38 a.m. and it prowled till about 5 a.m. Now the men were not patrolling anymore, so I did as I had done with the screech owl my first night there. I was alone in my tent, so I shone a light inside to illuminate the whole tent and make it large in the night, and I prayed. The next day, I spoke with two of the other women who were also alone in their tents, and they also heard the lion. One, Lauren, heard me wrestling around in my tent, and she said, I just kept silent. And I had suspected that she heard me and was up, but I was afraid to make too much noise by shouting out. And then Jazz was in a tent alone with her baby, and she just was like, she just accepted Yah's will. So Lauren kept still, I shone my light, and Jazz accepted Yah's will, whatever it was going to be. And the beast of the field left. Now, so just in summary for that, the lion, the beast of the field, called out from the wilderness and stalked us 3 different times, but did not harm us. The first time we turned around, the second time we went to our destination, to the water, and to pour out the waters on the ground to show the sign and to sow seeds for our redemption. A sign for Yah's judgment upon the nations that would bring us healing and redemption. And on our last night, even though we no longer had the patrol, we no longer needed to fear the roaring lion Satan, as long as we remained in obedience to Yah. The next day, we went to the lake to fish with Morey Yosh, and it was so fun and so liberating. And one of the guys that was there with us, I love just hiking in the mountains and stuff. And I have been dying to go up into these mountains. I literally had dreams about this kind of rock and stone for years, of climbing up a mountain, and trying to get back down the other side of it. And these stones were like the stones on the other side of the mountain. And so we literally want, I don't have an image of them, but they were very round and smooth and flat. And literally, we were actually hiking around the lion's den in bare feet. He had me take my shoes off because he was like, it's easier to hike on stones if your feet are bare. And it was true. So it was a wonderful experience. And Mora, Yosh, and Hulda fished and caught some fish. But they had to throw them back because they have to only be a certain size. Yosh and his wife Hulda were just so generous and nice. And I was there with Lauren and with Dinah. And it was just so magical and wonderful. And their generosity was just so lovely. And it was like being, again, like I said, being amongst family. And I have to say, we had a full moon for our Sukkot. Last thing that I'll add was that on my drive home, I had to turn on the radio and the song House of the Rising Sun came on. And it was a whole documentary about the various versions that had been sung and who they were curious to know who had written this song, who had written it, and what was it about. And Yah just gave it to me. It is a song of those in captivity of Israel. It is the house of the rising sun and the risen sun. There is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun. It's been the ruin of many a po' boy, and yeah, I know I'm one. My mother was a tailor. She sewed my blue jeans, my Levitical jeans. And I'm going to do a message on how women are built genetically, and those who build and knit together children in the womb by the hand of Yah and build the genes of children. And it says, my father was a gambling man, right? A boy was sold for a harlot and a girl for a glass of wine. The wonderful elders that we met, the kids, just putting up the tent. I mean, so much went on. So I just pray that Yah bless you and keep you and cause His face to shine on you. Gracious, lift the light of His countenance and give you peace. In Yeshua HaMashiach.
There is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor boy. And yeah, I know my mother was a tailor, sewed my own blue jeans. My father was a gambling man down in New Orleans. There is a house in New Orleans they call the Risen Sun, and it was the ruin of many a poor girl. And yeah, I know I'm one. So mothers, tell your children not to do what I have done. Live your life in sin and misery in the house of the risen sun. Michael, row your boat ashore. Hallelujah. Michael, row your boat ashore. Hallelujah. Michael, row your Hallelujah, border shore. Hallelujah. Michael Roya 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 border shore. Hallelujah.